Vanderjam.
Call me Juliet and call him the Technodromeo. Good morning! It's the Vanderjam. As always, it's me, Mayor Howard Vander, and as always, you can find me living over on Twitter at Vander_I am, coming to you with another episode of the Vanderjam, continuing the beautiful inertial momentum and, indeed, the good vibe fueled by you, dear listeners. First and foremost, beloved shout out to everyone in the Jam Nation who keeps this thing going, anyone who has donated their time, and more importantly, their cold hard cash. We have a special guest with us tonight. I believe third timer on the show, Twitter celeb these days, soup featurer, and all-around wonderful guy. We are here with You Twittily. We are here with the one and only Fredo Fabcrucci. We decide to shake off some bad vibes that are going on in life in the world and revel in positivity. And we have a surprisingly long and serious discussion of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But in talking about these ridiculous fellow Italian countrymen to Fredo, we end up talking about the subject of nostalgia more broadly. It opens up some interesting spaces, and we reckon with our own fond memories of childhood, while at the same time talking about how awesome Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was across many different iterations and franchises. I hope you enjoy the episode that follows. I know that I certainly did, and I loved this conversation. I love every conversation with Fredo. All guests are special. Fredo is a genuine, real one. Go smash follow, and may your day be free of sorrow. I'll be back before long. I like being here, and hopefully you like being here too. Most of all, I hope you enjoy what you're about to hear. Till next time. Alright, gang. Tonight we got something a little special on our hands. We're not talking to one of your average lobies. We got a bona fide celeb with us.
Come on, man.
That's right, the force majeure of soup du jour. We are sitting down with the one and only Gentleman Kong, Fredo Fabcrucci. Fredo, welcome back to the Vanderjam.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. You flatter me so much. Folks are going to look me up and be like, what the hell are they talking about? He's got like 7,000 followers. But yes, I'm
more than
huge,
double
extremely
me.
popular. Yeah.
You've lapped me like the lovely people on the internet can lap up your soup-related content over at UTwitILY on Twitter. UTwit, I love you, right?
That's right. UTWITILY. UTwit, I love you.
Yeah, I always think of it as Whittily, but that's not how it's spelled. Listen to Fredo. He knows where to find his account. Yeah, so right now, set in the Mind Palace, it is now 8:24 on a Tuesday night. What are you up to, my good sir?
Well, we were chatting about this before. I have been back on a Ninja Turtles kick lately, and right before recording, I was playing the Super Nintendo version of Turtles in Time on Cowabunga collection, and I've really been digging all the stuff in that collection. I have a lot of nostalgia for most of those games, although I did miss the original window on some of them, which we can chat about in a sec. But yeah, I've been just enjoying this nostalgia trip. I've also been watching the new show actually from like a couple years ago, and
there's a new Ninja Turtles show.
Yeah, it's on Nickelodeon, which I think is why I like missed it. I heard about it.
I think I missed it because I'm 36 and I have a day job.
Well, it's the same. I mean, yeah, I'm even older, but I'm an old fan of Ninja Turtles, and I remember hearing about it because I want to say like maybe Laird. One of the guys was at like a convention I went to and talked about it, and
Because
they
it was
showed.
Laird and Eastman, right?
Yes, Eastman and Laird are the original two guys, and I think it was one of them, along with like a couple of the folks that worked on the new show, were doing like a panel together, and showed some stuff from it, and it looked great. And then I just kind of forgotten about it over the years, and then playing this collection, there's a bunch of stuff. There's like stills from every TV show, and I had completely forgotten. Like,
Okay.
oh yeah, there was that 2018 show where the turtles are all different species, so they look really different.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so they're
How
different
can they
kinds
be
of
different
turtles.
species?
Yeah,
It's
they're
Ninja
different kinds of turtles. Like they're all turtles, but they're different kinds of turtles. So they have like different markings, and Raph is a lot bigger than the other three because he's like an alligator turtle or something.
Oh, come on! What are the odds that there would be three normal turtles and then an alligator turtle?
Well,
Like,
the other three are different too. Like Donatello's a soft shell turtle. I forget what Leonardo and
why would they
Michelangelo.
make him a soft shell turtle? He loses his tactical advantage.
It's funny that you mentioned that because that is one of the plot points in the show. Because Donatello's a tech guy, so part of what makes him like what he is that he's got all these like
Leonardo leads,
shells.
Donatello does machines.
He does machines, and all of his shells are like these they've got jetpacks and spider limbs and all this cool shit built in, and he can like throw one off and summon another one. Like Donatello actually does really.
Oh wow! So it's like the Extremis suits in Iron Man.
It's just they basically made Donatello like an Iron Man type character on the show, and it's
holy
great.
Shit, that is cool. Donatello it's awesome. As glass cannon. It's amazing. Okay, so maybe let's wind it back to the beginning.
Yes.
Laird Eastman. Cowabunga Collection, as I haven't played it, but I gather it's a compilation of the NES and Super NES games based on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or for our UK listeners, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
Of course, we're done.
Like that very bizarre joke book that I found. Did I read that to you on a previous episode?
Of a Ninja Turtles joke book?
A Hero Turtles joke book, and so it's British, so some of it doesn't make sense.
It does sound familiar, but it might have been an episode I listened to rather than one I was on. But it does.
The one that I do definitely remember is why did the depressed man jump down the manhole?
Okay, why? Why did he?
He wanted to commit suicide.
Oh,
and
boy.
It's like, so that gets past the censors, but you can't call them ninjas. What a country. So, yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for the absolute uninformed, Fredo, age before beauty, you tell the good kids listening to this show, who are the Ninja Turtles? What are they all about?
I will be happy to do that. I will also clarify, because I know that some folks are already writing angry letters. The collection also includes arcade and Genesis games, so it's not
nice.
Nintendo and Super Nintendo. But anyway,
because I remember Turtles in Time had slight but appreciable differences.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and both versions are on here. So you can play the arcade version, which is way more of a quarter muncher game, much more sort of difficult, and the Super Nintendo version, which, as you say. Sorry?
A real QM, as they say.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, it is a QM. So it's part of what makes it so neat is that, you can check out like different versions of the same game and how they try to like approximate the arcade game and the original NES.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I'm trying to think of other games where the home release was just radically different from the arcade one. Michael Jackson's Moonwalker was one, because the arcade was completely different than the Genesis one.
Oh yeah, the arcade game was excuse me. It was one of those like trackball games, right? Because it was like an isometric game. And
it was isometric. You could be one of three Michaels. It was 3-player co-op. And like it, I think it played out more like a scrolling shooter in some ways. And then the Genesis one, well, you're fighting dogs and like kicking open the trunks of cars and rescuing kids inside.
Yeah, they're radically different games. I mean, the Genesis version rocks. This is neither here nor there, but
That soundtrack, man, is great,
great.
especially on the Genesis sound chip.
Yeah, I mean, there's oh god, we could get into all sorts of like Michael Jackson Genesis stuff because he was apparently like a big Sega guy and like worked on the Sonic 3 soundtrack and all this
Yeah, and
nuts.
apparently that was actually like canon confirmed.
Yes, it came out like later I forget. I'm sure there are other Sonic fans that like remember those details better, but I do remember hearing about all of that.
Yeah, because it's one thing when it's like Tomb Raider has a dude code, or there's a Simpsons mode where they say the F word, that are just like the cultural mythos. It's rare but cool when they are actually proven to be true.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a rumor for a long time because there are a bunch of songs in the game that sounded like B-sides. Like I want to say the Ice Cap Zone song was basically like a Michael Jackson song. So it had been
Yeah,
rumored
Michael
forever.
Jackson's pop ballad, The Ice Cap Zone.
Yeah, the Ice Cap Zone, the
Yeah,
famous.
Ice Cap Zone is not my love.
I don't
Level.
think
I
Billie Jean
should have
made the
said
cut.
level.
Yeah, yeah, not my level. There you go. Um, so
It's
God, what
just a game that thinks that I'm player one.
there you go. There you go. See, this is what
Sega instant fun.
instant classic.
Yep.
Um, but anyway, yeah. So Ninja Turtles, because you asked me originally how to
Yes.
explain Ninja Turtles. So a popular cartoon when I was a kid, based on originally the comic, was a parody of Daredevil and
Yes.
what I because I want to say they were doing a few things that were popular at the time. So like Teen Titans, I think, is where the teenagers comes from.
Yeah. And
Daredevil's
I
was
think there's Frank Miller's what is it, Ronin, his Cyber Samurai book that's not all that great. There's like there's a rising sort of Japanophilia in comics art.
yes, that's right on because from what I understand, Eastman and Laird, the original two creators, were taking like a bunch of stuff that was sort of fashionable in comics at the time and doing kind of their own take slash parody of it. So like the Foot Clan was supposed to be a take on the Hand from
Mm.
Daredevil. Master Splinter was supposed to be like Master Stick. Yeah,
Stick,
probably got
Splinter, Hand, Foot. Oh my God, that's like
yeah,
House and
and
Sherlock
that
Holmes.
Ronin, yeah, I'm sure all that stuff like played into it. But yeah, it's
Casey
uh,
Jones is standing for Phil Esposito.
I don't know I mean Casey Jones. I wonder if it was just like yeah, I don't know. Like was
It's
maybe
like,
the hockey
I wonder
mask
why
was like
they
Jason.
introduced a skateboarding cool punk guy in a fashionable product for young people in the 90s.
Well, because Casey Jones was the sports, the hockey slash
Yeah,
everything guy.
he
And the
was the
turtles
Wayne
were
Gretzky's pro
skateboarders.
stars of comic
There
characters.
you go. Yes, Pro
Yeah.
Stars with Wayne Gretzky and was it Bo Jackson? Who was the
Bo
other?
Jackson and Michael Jordan,
And
I
Michael Jordan,
think.
but Michael Jordan was like not on there as because I remember they used to have the little intros, and it was always like Gretzky and I think Bo Jackson, but not Michael
Yes.
Jordan because he's like too
Cole
big time.
Wayne, he's always available. It's like, why did we sign Michael? His team makes the playoffs every year, and that's another 2 weeks we can't use him.
It is a peculiar. I mean, I would have guessed Gretzky was considered just as big a star in hockey, but I guess hockey just wasn't as big or whatever.
Well, Wayne Gretzky, though, as a person, because I grew up watching hockey, Wayne Gretzky as a person isn't necessarily like he's just a humble guy from like Ontario or whatever. And so, like they give him this cartoon character, but he, unlike someone like Deion Sanders or even Barry Bonds, like he doesn't have that outsized persona. It's just, Hey everybody, I'm Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
I think hockey is an important part of Canada's tradition of excellence. It's just, I don't know, you can't imagine him like having a crippling pill addiction or him like wrecking an SUV or something or making tabloid material. Isn't there like a Sears catalog where he's modeling socks in front of the fireplace?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he's one of those. I don't know very much about athletes in general, but he is one of those like famously wholesome. At least that was the impression I got. Athletes.
Yeah, it's you never know what happens behind the subaltern though, and that's where we encounter the foe to the Ninja Turtles, the Shredder.
Oh yes. Now Shredder, fun for
Oh
those of
wait, we forgot to explain who the Ninja Turtles are.
Yeah. Okay. So the Ninja Turtles. This is where it gets confusing because there's different origin stories based on like which comic continuity and the movie continuity and the show continuity. But generally, they are four actual turtles that got mutated by like the ooze,
The
which was
Turtles.
yes, they just and Splinter, their master slash father figure, is a rat. But with Splinter, they
Yep.
go back and forth on whether he was a rat that got mutated by the ooze or whether he was a human that was turned into a rat mutant. In the cartoon, it was the latter. In the movies, it was the former. And I think the original comic story was that he was like the pet rat of like a kung fu master that got
Yeah,
transformed.
because he watched the moves, right? And then the
Yes, and he
Shredder
learned. That's
killed his
exactly he learned
master.
because his cage was like next to the dojo floor.
Yeah, and after he kills his master, Rat Splinter like jumps and claws at Shredder's face, and that's why he wears the mask
Well, that was what it was in the movie. I don't
in the
know.
movie.
Yeah, I don't know how
But
much
like
of
it's
that was.
also I remember when the movie came out, it is a decidedly more close to the comics in terms of tone. The
Yeah.
subsequent ones become very much like Turtles, the brand, Turtles, the cartoon. Um, but I remember watching the first one a couple years ago and being like, this is surprisingly grim. Most of it is Raphael being like film noir guy. But the
Well,
four central turtles, though, they
yes.
they are raised by Master Splinter and they become unique individuals and martial artists named after. Is it the classical masters of painting?
Yes, Italian Renaissance. That's yeah. Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Donatello.
Okay, so as per the song, Leonardo leads blue
That's right.
one,
The blue one.
Donatello purple does machines bow staff. uh Raphael, red, is cool, but is it rude or
Cool
crude?
but rude. Yeah, cool but rude.
Michelangelo, yellow nunchucks, is a party dude, and that
Well,
really
Butch.
summarizes all you need to know.
Yeah, I mean that's your sort of one line intro to each of them. Fun little fact, by the way. In the original comics, they didn't even have different colors; they were just all red, and then they
Oh
changed them.
wow.
Yeah, they changed them to be color coded. I believe that was for the TV show, but then that just became, that became this sort of fundamental characteristic that was represented later in the comics and other places.
Well, let me also put it to you this way, going back to merchandising,
Oh yeah.
sellable youth properties. Let's have one doll we can sell versus four dolls we can
Now
sell.
you're getting it. Now you're getting it. Shout
Exactly.
shout out to my buddy Sal that used to work for the company that made the Halo toys, because there
Oh
was a whole
wow.
lot of the blue Spartan, the red Spartan,
More like
all
a
that stuff.
halo of toys.
Wait, sorry, what was that?
A halo of toys.
Oh,
And I think your
terrible,
stunned silence just made it
awful,
funnier.
yeah, awful. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, Halo toys, yeah.
I was waiting for the other shoe to fall, yes. No, so like it's funny though because Ninja Turtles was inescapable as kids, whether you saw it in the movie or especially the cartoon show.
Yeah,
And it's one of those
it
things
was
where
mega
people don't
huge.
remember how much they remember because of depending like what early year they were sitting in front of the TV watching Ninja Turtles. I think most people in our age, if you played like a season's worth, there would be something everyone's like, I remember this.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it was you're right, it was inescapable because even if you didn't care for the TV show or whatever, like the video games were in like every arcade and bowling alley. There was merchandise everywhere. The toys were some of the most popular toys. They
Yeah.
were on
There's a
t-shirts and stuff.
functional arcade near my house, and one of the machines they have is the Nickelodeon TMNT.
The Nickelodeon one. So is
Yeah,
there like
it's
a
like
newer
cell
game?
shaded. Yeah,
Okay.
it's done. It's done like a partial CGI kind of style. It's
I
sort
know the
of
one. It's one of the PS2 era ones. I would guess. I remember those like cell shaded, like action games. I just didn't know there was like arcade versions of any of those.
yeah, apparently so. There's
Oh,
also an
interesting.
arcade game that's soccer, and the controller is a ball you can kick with your foot.
I've heard of that, but not. You don't mean there's a Ninja Turtles version of that game, is there?
There's not yet,
Not
but
yet.
I
I mean,
mean, it's conceivable. Shaolin Soccer Ninja Turtles crossover. Book it.
I would absolutely. I mean, I'm a sucker for Ninja Turtles. I'll check out any Ninja Turtles thing.
So,
And
what is it that you like so much about Ninja Turtles aside from nostalgia?
yeah. Well,
Fine if it is purely nostalgia, but is there something more as an adult that you still derive so much enthusiasm for? It's
I
good to be enthusiastic.
I think that's a great question, and it's something I've been kind of grappling with recently because I've been watching the new show, and we could talk more about that in a sec. But like, there's the sort of fundamental like it's kung fu cool action stuff, and I'm a fan of those kinds of like martial arts movies and stuff. So it's neat to have like a TV show about these like stealthy ninja fighter badass characters.
Yeah.
Um, I like how each of them has like a different characterization that gets explored, and watching the new one especially, it feels like they're going for this very sort of a wholesome, like, oh, everybody you know is kind of like one of these turtles. It's the Donatello's like the guy you know that's really.
Lost it all on crypto.
Oh man, I wonder if they're gonna make like a joke about Donatello losing his money in crypto. The new one definitely has that sense of humor. But yeah, I don't know. I
Hear
always
me
thought the
out.
characters were
Ninja
fun. I always thought
fungible
the fighting.
turtles.
Sorry.
Ninja fungible turtles.
Oh man. Oh man. I really hope. Please don't manifest this into existence. I hope there's never going to
Print
be like
it.
a Ninja
It's
Turtles
done.
NFTs.
We just spoke it into the world. It has to happen now.
The good people at Nickelodeon, who I believe those are the current owners of Ninja Turtles, please just don't do it.
Yes.
But
You're
I
asking.
enjoyed the fighting and the ninja stuff was cool because like ninjas were cool as a little kid, and I think they're still cool now. I like the characters. I thought they were fun, like really creative enemies like Bebop and Rocksteady, who were this pig and rhino man mutant guys
Was it
that.
Warthog?
Yeah, Bebop was like a warthog guy,
Or a
and
boar?
Rocksteady was a
Yeah.
rhino.
And yeah, they Bebop looked a lot like Jerry Seggs from the Nasty Boys.
Oh yeah, he kind of did, didn't he?
Like a lot like it. If you go look it up, you will see I speak only truth.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be entirely outside the realm of plausibility that the character was based on somebody knew him or whatever. I think, right? Because I want to say, well, actually, I'm not sure which one
I mean,
predates.
the Hulkster's fingers are everywhere.
Are all over, yeah, and it does kind of have. I'm a big wrestling guy as well, and it does have a sort of wrestling-esque, over-the-top nature of like the gimmicked characters, all these different weird mutant animal
Well, it's
adversaries.
also every single character and every single frame of what it is instantly readable. Like there's no gray and gray morality. It's very clearly in color code. Like who's the good guy here? The stern turtle issuing the right plan to his fellow turtles, or that hideous monster thing that's snarling at them. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. Like, Bart says that wrestling works because every moment of it is instantly readable in terms of like narrativity and classic performance.
Well, you hit on something really interesting there, because I think one of the reasons that I was maybe drawn to it as a kid and I found it so interesting is there is that imagery that the enemies are definitely like more monstrous and gross, but a part of it is supposed to be that the turtles, the heroes, they are like weird monsters and people are afraid of them, but they're good guys.
And their disguise is just them wearing trench coats and hats.
Which is very, very fun. They make a joke about that in the new show, where there's several times. There's a neat thing in the new show where there's this whole like kind of secret society of mutants operating in the fringes of society. So they're like, instead of like every mutant being like a monster,
like the Hellfire Club.
It kind of, yeah, like there actually is, like, I forget if it's a pizza place or there's like a sort of club/restaurant that's just like for mutants.
Okay, like Lucifer.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's all like weird mutants and monsters and stuff.
Now, not to cut you off, but have you seen the Those Turtles video?
No, what is this?
Okay, I just sent you a link on DM. It's a piece of internet lore, but it also involves the turtles in their disguises. Yeah, like, I guess what's surprising is that something that's so seemingly facile as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sounds like it is not only capable of changing and adapting as a form, but doing so in a satisfying way. I was talking to a resident friend of the show, movie nerd, Karl Marx, and no, not the one. We were talking about the Halloween series and like how over time, every time they reboot it, it's to a different set of audience expectations of what horror film needs to be. And so the people making it are aware of that expectation and they produce different takes accordingly. And it really eventually gets far afield from the fact that like Carpenter's film, the original, worked so well because it simply is what it is. It presents a situation, we get all the context that we need to know, and part of what makes it scary is that we don't have more than that, right?
Yeah, that's
and that's not to say the further iterations don't have their merits, but it's very different. Whereas it seems with Ninja Turtles, it works more holistically as a universe.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's tricky because I do feel like there's a lot of difference between the original comic and the original cartoon, and it feels like the various iterations they've done, like there's definitely a lot of things they do have in common, but each of them seems to pitch a certain vibe that's closer to one or the other.
All right, give us some examples.
Like, I would say the mid-2000s show that was a little bit closer to, had more of a cel-shaded look, was a little bit closer than the 80s and 90s show to the comics. I don't know if you've ever seen, have you ever seen Turtles Forever? It rocks, by the way. Super.
I have not seen Turtles Forever. What's
that? Turtles Forever was like a made-for-TV movie special that they did in, I want to say, the late 2000s. And the premise being the turtles from the original cartoon meet the turtles from the 2000s cartoon.
Yes.
And then there's a late game twist where both sets of turtles meet the original comic turtles. And there's this running gag, right, of like, well, the 90s, the 80s, 90s Turtles are like a lot goofier because it was a goofier cartoon, right? It was like an 80s, 90s cartoon, and they almost never used their weapons, and they would fight very indirectly by, knocking an enemy into like a mine cart and rolling the cart
away.
away.
You distract the Foot Clan, I'll disable Krang's machine.
Right, exactly. And then the 2000s Turtles are always making fun of them for being like these kind of like goofball, unserious kind of characters. And then like an hour
these guys don't even have a body count. That's so
that
not
is that is
Cowabunga.
exactly right. Like you won't even, the new Leo was like, you won't even use your swords, to like old Leo.
Mm.
But then it subverts that in an interesting way, where towards the end of the movie you meet the original comic turtles, and the original comic turtles are fucking absolute killers. I mean,
Oh
they're
man.
like they like tear Shredder apart in the first episode of the comic, like
Jesus
repeatedly stab
Christ, that's
brutally.
insane.
Yeah, it's like a hardcore comic. So when those turtles show up, the 2000s turtles are like lame losers compared to them,
Oh
and they're
man.
making fun of
Always
them.
somebody
So
better
it's a
and
neat, yeah.
deadlier.
It's really
Yeah.
cool. It's really cool the way that they've kind of like acknowledged the different takes that they did in the past and how they differ from the original. And like the new show is another like new take as well. So I
Yeah.
really dig it.
Well, it's like personally, I thought No Way Home was very satisfying, and not just for nostalgia reasons. And I think it's the difference between, like, especially when you get into long running franchises, you can do like the crossover, but there sort of needs to be a point, and the point can't just be everybody looking at the camera and saying, remember, that's self awareness.
Yeah, I agree with you. You have to like bring something to the table, and I thought that the new Spider-Man is a good example because they did some like interesting stuff with that character. They like de-aged him. They made him like back in high school. It wasn't an origin story. It was largely about how he's dealing with being a superhero in this world where there's also all these other superheroes that he like respects. I thought it was like a fun take, and I'm a
Yeah.
I'm a
And like
Spider-Man
it's
fan.
a take that makes sense and can only really exist after the MCU has become a thing, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like you can't make the Tom Holland Spider-Man film fundamentally like the same year that Tim Burton's Batman comes out, right?
Now that
The
would have
same way
been
that you can't
wild.
make
That would have been so
well, you
wild.
can't make a Justice League film the same year Donner's Superman comes out, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, those are all things that like movies are in a different place and they require the context of the previous entries, but not only
Well,
the
exactly. Like,
context,
imagine
why.
Spider-Man just coming out and it's like, I'm a kid. Here are all these other people flying in and stuff. Like, the bigger the MCU becomes, like, the bigger so much of the narrative kind of coasts on the fact that you already know who these characters are
Right.
in
Yeah,
a
they can
way
have it be
that,
I mean, it is an established universe, right? So
yeah.
having an established universe lets you kind of get away with stuff that you maybe can't get away with in in a movie where you're building everything from
Well,
scratch.
yeah. So everybody razzes on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man because they're like, oh, it's too goofy and cartoony. It's like, it's instantly sensible. We very clearly understand not just who the good guys and bad guys are, but even the characters with, like, yeah, James Franco is a prick because Harry's supposed to be. Yeah, Peter's kind of a mensch, but he is supposed to be, and
For sure.
we see him win. Yes, there's a sinister side to Norman Osborn. He is played by Willem Dafoe. It's
He was great
and
in that.
yeah, and Spider-Man 2, I still watch it every now and then. It remains an excellent example of how to make a superhero film. It doesn't require a tie-in to anything else. It is about the nature and need for heroism itself while still being incredibly fun.
Yeah, I think those are great movies. Well, like a lot of folks, I thought the third one had, its flaws, but overall, big fan of the Raimi Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, the third one doesn't have that emotionally satisfying moment, right? Number one has the kiss. It has, I do have a father. His name was Ben Parker. The second one, everything about Dr. Octopus is emotional.
Yeah, he was great.
You got the union at the end. Number three is just like, well, I guess we feel bad for Sandman's daughter.
Yeah, I feel like in 3 they probably could have done more with because the whole black suit storyline is a famous comic storyline.
Yes, it is.
Bringing out certain emotions in Peter, and they tried to do that in the movie. It just
it also gave us Maximum Carnage, the video.
Yeah, Maximum Carnage, which we got to revisit that in the recent Venom sequel with Woody Harrelson as Carnage.
Yeah, which I have not seen. I saw Venom and I'm like, it's fine. Like, I don't dislike it. It's perfectly good. Just not really necessarily. I have no free time, man. I can't spend it all watching superhero movies.
Hey man, you gotta find the time. This is important stuff,
Yeah.
brother.
But like three has fun moments. Like you cannot hate on a film too much if it features a scene of his evil self showing it by disrupting a piano jazz
Oh,
bar
for sure.
and
That stuff
yelling,
all
"Now
rocks. I
dig
mean,
on
yeah,
this." Like Tobey Maguire's evil self yelling, "Now dig on this." How
yeah,
do you not just die over it?
he was great. And now that you mention it, looking back on it, I mean, we did get like funny memes out of that sequence, and it is like in the spirit of the movies being a little bit more cartoony. That like
Yeah.
I think we maybe expected it to be a little different because I remember even in the '90s Spider-Man cartoon, the storyline with the black suit was like as grim and dark as that cartoon ever
Oh
got.
yeah, I remember that as a kid. And I remember vividly being so excited they were introducing Venom because Eddie Brock was one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Sort
Venom.
of the same way, like he is to Marvel what Two-Face is for me for DC, I guess, where not only is he the anti-hero more than he is a villain, but like as a mirror of the protagonist. And everybody hates on Topher Grace for being cast as Eddie Brock, but like
He wasn't
I
given much to do, he wasn't given a lot to do anything with,
Yeah.
you know?
And that's the problem because if they focus more of the film on that, it makes sense when you think of him being a counterpart to Tobey Maguire rather
It's
than him being Eddie Brock from the comics.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like in another universe where instead of trying to do Venom and Sandman in one movie, the Black Suit and Venom would have just been like a movie by itself.
Well,
That would
yeah,
have worked.
because they also retcon Uncle Ben's death, which we see on screen
Yeah.
happening differently 2 movies ago.
Yeah, it's from what I hear, it was the victim of executive meddling that they wanted to have
Absolutely.
Venom
I
be in
don't
the
think
movie, and yeah,
anyone was clamoring for a snowboard goblin glider. But, and that's the thing though, because like, even a concept like Ninja Turtles, like Spider-Man, yeah, there's an absurdity and like if you want to be like an objective realist, there's a ludicrousness at the heart of what these narratives are presenting
for
you.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But we can suspend disbelief and accept it up until a point, right? Like we can accept, Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus and him slowing down the speeding subway train because that's delivered in a way that's satisfying. Whereas James Franco wearing like a domino mask and green body armor being like, Peter, you were my best friend. And like the butler being like, your father loved you, Harry, and I love you too. It's those moments break it for us. Whereas Ninja Turtles, I mean, I remember while it's not something I'm as well averse in you, there was never that moment where I'm like, okay, now we're just getting ridiculous.
Well, I don't know. The Turtles in Time movie, the third movie, which was ostensibly
Oh, where they
based
go
on,
back to historical Japan?
yeah, that was a pretty rough. Yeah, that was pretty bad.
I literally remember one thing about it. I saw it on my birthday one year in theaters, and there's the one point where the Japanese guy is yelling Kappa at them. He's Kappa! And Michelangelo's response is, Cappuccino? No way, man. Makes me hyper.
Yeah, I take it back. Actually, that rocks. That movie was good. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Rick,
I think it's a misunderstood classic based off that specific joke I remember.
I kind of want to rewatch it now. I remember it seemed noticeably cheaper than the previous ones too. Like they had cheaper, shittier suits and stuff.
Yeah. And it felt very much like kind of a Highlander progression. What about we start a podcast where we look at the different Ninja Turtles movies called Teenage Mutant Ninja Theorists?
Go on. just breaking down the movies. Or
Yeah, or just watching them and being like, man, it was pretty awesome when Donatello spun in the air and then hit the three guys with his bow staff.
there
And
was
they
a
were
lot of
like,
cool stuff that's seen it. I forget if it was the beginning of the first movie or the second movie where Michelangelo's using the sausages as nunchucks,
oh, yeah, yeah.
fighting in that like food court or whatever.
And they do their James Cagney impressions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot.
And Michelangelo sounds like weirdly Japanese.
I don't remember. Was he trying to do like maybe a dubbed kung fu actor type voice?
Maybe. I don't think he knew who James Cagney was. Which is possible, you know. Also, have you seen the original dub, the Streamline Pictures version of Akira?
I've definitely seen Akira, but I'm not. I want to say
If you've seen it on tape, it's probably this one because the same voice actor who does Leonardo in the '90s cartoon series,
Cam Clark, of course, he also voiced.
He is also Kaneda.
Okay, yes, I have seen that because I do remember. I do
Come
remember.
on, Tetsuo, you'll never take me down.
That's right, and I will not. Suffer any ill will towards Cam Clark, who is amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
all the original
voice acting.
Yes,
everybody's great. That's why they get paid.
Yeah, they're all great. Rob Paulson as Raphael, one of the all-time legends. Absolutely.
I don't know him. He's no Lorenzo Music.
He's Yakko in Animaniacs.
Okay, I do know that.
Yeah, he's a super prolific voice actor. You've definitely heard a lot of stuff he's done. I'm trying to think of like what are his other like most famous roles. But he has like a distinctive voice that you'll
exactly. Yes. And with prolific voice actors, like you hear it, and some people just from cadence, you're like, even if you don't know who it is, Keith David visually and orally
for sure
is a complete through and through. That guy, Jim Cummings. As a voice actor, once you hear him in anything, because he always kind of has like an underbite tonality. That's why he's Winnie the Pooh and shows up in Splatterhouse, but he's like, based with a human heart.
He's doing his Pete from Goof Troop voice in because he's also Pete from Disney.
Goof Troop, yeah, makes sense.
Hell, Goof.
He was also Bump in the Night. Did you ever see that one?
Oh yeah, that was the like monster the claymation show, right?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Mr. Bumpy. I go bump in the night.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, I'm getting real nostalgic this episode.
Yeah, it's last time we talked about Pirates of Black Water, so I guess we're
Dark Water. Pirates of Dark Water.
That's the one.
Yeah,
I was thinking about the evil private military corporation.
From that. Or in general, I don't even remember.
I mean, the Ninja Turtles themselves can be seen as a kind of urban guerrilla gang. Ironic, because they are of a wholly different species than gorillas.
That is true. And that is ironic in a way.
Now, Dr. Fabrucci, what do you think society needs to do in order to facilitate the Turtles as an ally?
I feel like one of the things that the new show highlights very well is that the Turtles have this like real genuine like goodness and earnestness to them. They are like extremely uncynical and tend to sort of assume that other people are being earnest. And I think assuming that other people are not being earnest is one of those things that like makes folks more aggressive, less trusting, et cetera, et cetera. So I think if we want to really embrace the Turtles and show them that we are as good as they give us credit for, we need to be a lot more earnest and a lot less cynical. That's Dr. Fabrucci's take for you, brother.
True. Now, they say that, before you can judge a man, you must
Uh-huh.
walk a mile in their shoes.
Right.
But,
I throw a lot of stones, at glass houses.
yeah. The problem is, Dr. Fabrucci, even if one agrees with your bold assertion there, these are neither men nor are they wearing shoes.
That is
To
true.
what degree, biologically, are we even capable of feeling empathy and compassion towards these, hell, I'll say it, these freaks of science?
Okay, well, little bit mean to call them freaks of science, although I do understand what you're saying. Because yes, technically, unlike a lot of, I guess, mutant characters, the one of the things that's interesting about the Ninja Turtles is that they were never human. They were like pet turtle. They were like from a pet store or something. But they obviously have the like developed brains of humans, right? Like they're not they don't really like process emotions fundamentally differently from the way people do. So they're for all intents and purposes they are people. They just look different, right? There's nothing about like the way their brains biologically work. I mean, I know an actual turtle there are differences, but not the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I think that like
Right,
yeah, you
that's where the mutation comes in. It's
right.
a
It
useful
basically makes them
umbrella.
humanoid. Yes, humanoid. And that's a thing. Actually, if anybody that knows more about Ninja Turtles could write in and let us know, because one of the plot points you see a lot on the show is somebody else, like something or someone else, will get mutated and they'll be like this giant mindless monster, like Toka and Razor, for instance, in the movie,
Oh,
or the
yeah.
second movie.
Because
Uh,
they're basically like the gritty Bebop and Rocksteady analog, right? But they're not like
yeah,
wisecracking punk guys. They're
there
just
was some
monsters.
reason like they wanted. I think that they just didn't have the rights to those characters or something, so they had to like
Hmm.
invent some new ones. But yes,
Imagine not having the rights to Ninja Turtles, but having the rights to Bebop and Rocksteady.
well, I think it might be because Bebop and Rocksteady were created for the show, and the movie maybe had
Ah.
the comic license.
That
So
happens every now and then, how like Marvel couldn't use Fantastic Four for the
yeah,
longest time, and
it's a good example of exactly that same kind of thing.
yeah, it's or like, and because they couldn't use Fantastic Four, they couldn't use the Skrulls.
Right.
So you watch Avengers and you're like, well, I got a feeling I know what these guys are supposed to be,
Uh
only
huh.
they can't be that. And then it turns out that Disney just made enough money that problems went away over
Yeah,
time.
they were just able to get it, and then they have to like yeah, find a way to weave in all of that stuff that they had to dance around before, which I know everybody is wondering, like, how are they going to finally pull the trigger on like X-Men and Fantastic Four and all that?
I think
Uh,
after a point, they're just going to be outright cynical, and like X-Men just show up in a scene. They're like, "Hey guys, we've been Avengers for a long time. That's right, you've
oh
always
wow,
been here."
that would suck a lot if they just pretended like the X-Men have always been here. Look, it's our friend
Exactly.
Wolverine, and he's just
Hey,
like
Wolverine,
fighting
it's me,
alongside.
Tony Stark. Hey, Tony, I remember helping you when Obadiah Stane tried to buy you out of your company.
They retcon Wolverine into the first Iron Man movie for some
Yep.
reason.
Well, I mean, he does live a very long time.
That's
And, like,
true. He could be.
Professor X is like, oh, hey there, Spider Man. Remember that time that I helped you take down Michael Keaton? It's like, oh, yes, now I remember. And there's a
Yeah,
flashback.
they call him
Professor X
Michael
is just
Keaton. They
watching.
refer to the actor's name for like they just go extremely like Deadpool style meta,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And they look directly into the camera while smirking as they do it.
I mean, it works for Deadpool.
Does it?
Well, I think so. I think those Deadpool movies are fun.
I I think it really depends on your tolerance for Ryan Reynolds' self-satisfaction.
I get what you're saying because I know that like people doing the like Deadpool characters like a really overdone thing at like conventions and stuff. So I can definitely see how it would get tiresome, but I think
Well,
like,
but
people
Deadpool can be done cleverly, and that's not to say that Reynolds doesn't occasionally do clever things in the movies. It's just I feel like regardless of output. It's done with an absolute confidence, like he already knows how funny this is. And I'm like, I don't think you're clever enough to warrant that kind of, like, I don't know. You just look at a guy and know that he's a dick about his own performance.
I'm
John
not
Hamm
sure
is
I
an
get what you're saying.
asshole on sight. You have to look at the man and hear him speak for 5 seconds before you just know it.
I've always heard he's a nice guy.
I've heard he's a horrible person.
Really?
That's not
Oh,
the
well,
point.
that's
I can
very
expect
interesting.
it.
Huh.
Well, apparently when Amy Poehler was getting divorced on SNL, he was like, look, I know you got a lot of shit going on, but this night's big for me. And, like, I don't know. He seems
Seriously?
like
I never heard that story. That's
he
fucked
seems
up.
like a capital A actor.
All right. Well, that's not great. Ryan Reynolds, I think you need to go on the Jam and explain yourself.
Ryan Reynolds, fuck off. I don't want you on the show.
It could be a running gag where he's trying to get on the show, but you don't want him on the show.
I already have that. He's called Billy.
Billy.
It's just, I mean, like, honestly, maybe that's a bigger point. That Ryan Reynolds, it's cool that you want to be on the Jam, but it's not up to you.
That's true.
Mayor is not entitled to a lot of things, but this shit's mine. I'm the gatekeeper, and I'm allowed to be a dick about it. Go find your girl and another guy in a pizza place, and go bother somebody else. Wednesday is the date on ABC.
Wow, I'd completely forgotten about that show because that was
Most
where he
people did.
Yeah.
Oh man, life really takes you places. Is he still married to Alanis?
Was he married to Alanis?
They were an item, at least. And then he was with Scarlett Johansson, Scarnolds.
I don't. So this is all. I see. I never pay attention to this kind of like celebrity relationship stuff.
I wish I didn't know this stuff. I try not to pay attention to celeb talk now.
This is going back 100 years because I do remember the Dave Coulier from Full House and the guy that You Ought to Know was written about, but that's as far as my lore on that goes.
And drums on that track played by recently deceased Taylor Hawkins.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I knew him as Alanis's drummer before the Foo, because I'm that kind of cool kid.
Oh, yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah. It's a jagged little pill to swallow, but you gotta take that medicine, doc. Physician, heal thyself.
All right, wow.
What a great extended
you're really firing on all cylinders tonight.
Yeah, it's you bring it out of me, doc. You giving me the juice. So Ninja Turtles Comeback Collection.
Cowabunga Collection.
Cowabunga Comeback.
Cowabunga Comeback. That's right.
All right, Cowabunga Comeback.
It is a comeback of sorts.
Yes. So walk us through what this is. Where does it start now that we understand these turtles proper?
Okay. So it starts with that's a good chronologically. I'm not sure. I want to say maybe the NES game. It was either the original arcade game or the NES game came out first.
Yeah. Now, the NES one, you remember two things if you ever played this game. The water level and that one jump in the warehouse.
Yep, that's exactly right. The jump that you had to walk across, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think the arcade, you know what? And actually, I've got the game here, and there is a whole museum in here, so I might actually be able to check and see which one of them came out first.
We're learning through technology.
We are learning through technology, so let's check. Let's see. The box on the original NES game, by Ultra Games, of course, because they had a deal where you could only put out, any company could only put out a certain number of NES games per year. So Konami made a fake. This is such bad.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Oh, did you not know about this?
No, I had never
Yeah,
heard
so
of Ultra
Nintendo
Games.
had a restriction that like if you were a developer or publisher, you could only put out like I don't it was like 6 games or like some amount of games per year. But Konami was big and they wanted to put out more games, so they created Ultra Games as basically like a fake second company, so they could release more
They
games.
made their own front developer.
Yes,
That's
they made a
amazing.
front developer. So here, by the way, I'm looking at, okay, I got 89 as the date on the NES Turtles game.
Okay.
And let's see. This game, by the way, it has like magazine ads, design documents. It's got like so much behind the scenes stuff on all these games. It's really interesting. So
What's in the box, indeed?
yeah, let's see let's see when the original arcade game. I want to say it was around the same time because I remember all of these from when I was a kid. Um, Original
I
arcade.
have memories of the original arcade one, but I don't know if I actually played it. I was
Yeah.
that kid who would always walk in the arcade and just sort of spectate. I don't know. Maybe I was hoping someone would give me quarters. Arcade also 89.
Yes, both of them are 89. So the earliest 2 games on here are the original arcade game,
And it is developed by Konami proper.
yeah, they are all developed by Konami, but a
Yes.
couple of the NES games were labeled Ultra
It
Games.
was the highest grossing arcade game of 1990 in the United States.
I believe it. It was a huge game. It was like
Yeah,
that.
Konami's highest grossing arcade game.
Yeah, it was a.
Okay, and then Turtles in Time, which is a scant 2 years later.
Yeah.
That's more or less a direct sequel to the arcade game.
Yes, that's correct. So most of the stuff here is a fairly narrow band of time. So you had that original 89 arcade game, you had the NES game, which was a totally different, this weird side-scrolling game that definitely has a lot of, there's some interesting stuff in it, but it's definitely like a tricky, early-ish NES game.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's Ninja Turtles 2 for the NES, which was a port of that 89 arcade game.
Okay, I thought so, because that one always played differently.
Yes, so instead of being like a 2D side scroller, it's a belt scroller, right? It's like a beat 'em up style game. Although to make it work on the NES, they had to make a bunch of like weird concessions, so it controls like a little differently. The enemies get like big invulnerability windows when you try to hit them, so you have to like hit an enemy, then run away, then hit them again. It feels very unsatisfying compared to the actual arcade game, but it's an approximation, right? It's like the levels and the enemies from the arcade game.
Yeah, and that was something else that gamers of previous generations had to get used to. Hey, you liked Pit Fighter in the arcades? Well, go to hell. Here it is on Super NES.
Yeah, here's like a total piece of shit. Yeah, that's it's an interesting game to go back and play because it's neat to see how they were able to approximate that kind of game on a system that was, so much less powerful, but it's obviously way less fun. It's obviously like a way worse version of the game.
But that's the funny thing, because in 91, Japan, 92, it comes out in North America, Ninja Turtles 3, The Manhattan Project.
Yeah. Now,
that
Manhattan
one
Project
is similar gameplay to the arcade one, but I remember that one very fondly, and it was a lot of fun. Maybe because they were developing it for the console rather than trying to approximate.
I think that's right on. So Manhattan Project is a fascinating game, and it's one that was like a blind spot for me because it came out so late on the NES. And yeah, it's structurally pretty similar to the second game.
Because it's the last NES one too, right?
Well, it's a late, like Tournament Fighters was even later, but yeah, it's the last. Of
that
we could talk about Tournament Fighters in a sec because that's another fascinating series. But you are right. Like Manhattan Project is great. It's easily the best of those like original 3 Turtles games.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just didn't really get a fair shake because it came out so late in the like the Super Nintendo and Genesis were already out. It came out around the same time as Turtles in Time and Hyperstone Heist for the SNES and Genesis, which are also in this collection. So a lot of people just kind of ignored it, but it's a great original NES game.
Yeah,
very
like how there was Star Tropics 2 in that, but it came out like literally 6 months before they discontinued the console.
it's super late, and Tournament Fighters. So yeah, Tournament Fighters is another like fascinating series, and that got versions on the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, and the original NES. All three of them were like pretty different games, and the original NES version, I want to say, was like Konami's last NES game, one of the last NES games. Period. It was like 93, 94,
Oh,
super. I mean,
wow.
almost like the PlayStation era. So very, very, very
My
late.
God.
But it's also like good and interesting because like trying to do it was like a Street Fighter clone basically. So trying to do like a Street Fighter style game on the original NES, and they
Yeah.
released this thing that's sort of like halfway between Urban
Because there was the
Champion and
super version of Tournament Fighters, right?
yeah, and the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions were closer to Street Fighter. It was like Street Fighter with Ninja Turtles characters, way
Yeah.
less good, but that's what they were going for. And then the NES version was like, okay, we're going to try to do something like this on the original Nintendo, which obviously, technically, had nowhere near the capability to do that. So they did something really
Maybe the
different.
kids won't notice.
Well,
On the
I'm
classic Nintendo
surprised that
Canarna,
they
we'll make
even
it really hard so we don't have to develop an ending.
I'm honestly pretty surprised they even made it, right? Because you would think that by then they would have figured like it's probably not worth it to like put something on the original Nintendo here, but they did,
Yeah.
and it's also really good. Like Manhattan Project and Tournament Fighters for the NES, like both rock, and they're really underappreciated games because they came out like so. Like I didn't have an original Nintendo anymore by the time these games were out, so like
Yeah.
unless you knew
Like most
someone
people
that
have moved on to the new gen. Because
most people
especially
have
with
moved
like
on.
marketing for the console wars, it's like, no, mom, dad, you don't understand. We have to get a Super Nintendo.
For sure. I mean, I remember when Turtles in Time was like the super hot game, right? And then Turtles in Time came out on SNES, was a huge hit on SNES, and then in that same
Yes.
window, they were like, okay, let's do a Genesis game too, and they did Hyperstone Heist, which is this weird. It's got like some stuff from Turtles in Time, some stuff from the original arcade game. It's like this kind of Frankenstein game made with different
Turtles versus Frankenstein. I'm on
different
board.
yeah different like bosses and levels borrowed from each of those games, and then I guess they
Bury my
thought
shell at Wounded Knee. I
Bury My
remember
Shell
that.
at Wounded Knee, Prehistoric Turtlesaurus, all that like weird shit. um and I guess they had thought at the time, well, let's also do something on the NES and do Manhattan Project, which turned out to be great. And then another like 2-3 years later, because Tournament Fighters was like it was a late game for the SNES and Genesis. So the fact that even in that window they were like, let's put one of these out for the original Nintendo as well was bonkers. I mean, it was already like almost bonkers for them to do it with Manhattan Project like a couple years earlier. But I guess it goes to show you like they really sold a ton of original Nintendos that they thought it was worth the investment.
Yeah, I remember actually looking up the other day what the like the relative sales are. The NES sold, I think, something close to 60 million units worldwide. The Super actually only sold like 45, and the 64 only sold, I think, 30. Meanwhile,
Yeah,
you look at from the Wii, the DS platform in particular, these ones crack the 100 million sales mark. And it's interesting just to think that there was a time where, as they say, like Space Invaders was so popular in Japanese arcades, it caused a yen shortage. And you think about it, and it's like, in terms of like sales per unit, it's much less than what we see in the present, but there's a level of fevered engagement with the fandom that seems less common.
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because sure, most people you knew had a Wii, but you never really think about it as like, no, this has actually sold twice as many as the original Nintendo, whereas the original Nintendo has such a memory foothold in ways that Wii Sports Resorts does not.
Yeah, I get what you're saying because I think what happened is it just became more mainstream. So like
Yeah.
I'm assuming that probably the attach rate is like lower now than it used to be of like how many games the average person buys with each console, because they sell way more consoles these days. But the people that buy them, there's a lot of people that buy like a PlayStation and they get like one game a year or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
back then, they maybe didn't sell as many like Nintendos as they sold Wii's, but the people that had a Nintendo were like more into it than the average person that had a Wii was into that. You know what I mean? Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Well,
Yeah.
and also the fact that like AAA development wasn't really a thing aside from just what Nintendo did naturally, but they never framed it as AAA development. They just went ahead and did it. And it's
They
like,
just
oh,
made
hey,
better games, you
we
know,
have
with
a Mario game and it is astonishingly complete, right?
yeah, I mean
Um,
back then, all most games really were similarly, low resources, right? Like any whether it's Mario or Zelda or whatever throwaway game, most games had a crew of like maybe a dozen people working on them. They would turn them around in like a year or two, and some of them would turn out great, and some of them would turn out not so great. And that's just the way it was. I mean, it's not like now where yeah, you have this like tier of games that have hundreds and hundreds of people working on them and they cost hundreds of millions of dollars and they're expected to sell 8 figures worth of copies to make up for those development cycles. I mean, yeah, you're right, that is like a modern
well,
thing.
it
Like,
also takes so much longer, and now when games come out, they're $90 on the first day.
yeah,
Whereas, like, certainly I remember Super NES games, like especially like the Nintendo developed ones being pricey as a kid. But like
yeah,
also with the
they,
NES, there was just such a glut of games available in the marketplace that, okay, well, this game kind of sucked. Whatever. I'll spend $20 and get Rainbow Islands and hope for the best.
yeah, it was definitely that pre-internet era of games was an interesting one because
Yeah.
it was
Well,
harder.
there's some gems there too. And,
Oh, for sure.
but there was also this assumption as a gamer and a consumer that, yeah, when I press power, this game very well may be impossible and broken shit, and that's kind of on me. Whereas,
Yeah.
like, we have a very different relationship, not just to the gaming experience, but to the very act of, or the view of ourselves as gamer consumers. Like, Mass Effect 3 and the ending pushback, that absolutely would not have happened if they bricked up the ending of Final Fantasy VI, right? And not just because they couldn't give you DLC back then.
No, yeah, it was a different culture, and not to mention, you're talking about like in that era. I mean, as I've realized playing through these old Ninja Turtles games, Final Fantasy VI was not that far outside of the era of games where you would beat a game and you would get one screen that's like, "Congratulations, the heroes are successful," and like that's the
Yeah,
ending. There wasn't
congratulations, thanks to play.
for great game where that Ghostbusters, right? Congratulations,
Oh
you have
yes,
completed great game or whatever it
you
is.
have proved the virtue of our culture.
Yeah, it was like game endings were basically nothing. They were
Yeah,
like if
it
you
was
were
like we're
lucky,
gonna
you maybe
slot
got
in a
like a picture.
screen, and so every 20 levels you beat of the same layout, you get this screen.
Yeah, it felt like it was really, in the PS1 era, you started to get more like narrative games and expectations really started to become higher for endings, right?
Yeah.
Because remember
I think
playing
JRPGs also, just given the way that they are designed, they're allowed to be narrative focused, and they
that's
kind of
true.
have to be narrative focused in ways that say, what is it? Rocky Rodent doesn't have to.
Yeah, no, I mean, thinking about like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy
Oh,
VI,
so
right,
good.
on the SNES, or even stuff like Fantasy Star, like those games definitely had like ending arcs, right? Like it wasn't just one screen. But outside of that genre, right, a lot of games did have these kind of nothing endings, and it wasn't until the PlayStation where you started to see like action game, Metal Gear Solid, right, having like a big dramatic acted ending.
Exactly. And the push for games as a kind of cinematic
Yes,
expression.
absolutely. You started to get more into those and even, your platforming games, your stuff like Crash Bandicoot or whatever, they'd have like fun little cutscenes, and they really put like work into those endings that wasn't really
as
a thing.
opposed to us popping because, oh, hey, this Pac-Man screen, like the interstitial, is different than the one I saw 5 levels ago.
Yeah, you're like, oh, you made it to the one with the cherry, or whatever.
Oh, the ghost is now chasing Pac-Man. He's really big. Look out, Pac-Man.
Pac-Man, yeah, for sure.
But Pac-Man got that dog in him. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think of these things relative over time, simply because more than anything, the real value is I can reflect on what everyone's freaking out about in gaming or tech discourse these days and be like, everybody calm down. Because really, very few issues we deal with in terms of technology ultimately end up being new or proposing fundamentally different questions than society has ever asked itself anytime technology is introduced or aestheticized in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've reached I think video games have reached a point of sort of narrative complexity that people are able to have conversations that they used to have like in English class about books, about like the stories in games, which I think is interesting, right? Like that we all make fun of like it's a video game discourse and all these pseudo intellectuals on Twitter, but like I think it's neat that video games have gotten to that point of people actually able to have like philosophical conversations about them.
And I knew cats who did their master's thesis on fireworks as a kind of visual public cinema. And I'm like, if that's what the Academy endorses, then piss off, everybody. Let's look not necessarily framing all games as art necessarily, but recognizing that some games certainly aspire to a level of art that others don't.
It is honestly, I mean, I know this is like such a tired debate, but it is to me pretty shocking how long it took and how many like seriously artistic, narrative, well thought out game experiences, decades and decades of them, we had to have before that became like a mainstream thing, right? Because these days it's like, yeah, everybody knows like video games genuinely try to have, not all of them, of course, but the medium certainly has meaningful, poignant narratives and artistic merit and all this stuff.
Critical spaces have gotten to the point where, like, video games can win BAFTA awards, right?
Right, but it's like unreal to me that didn't happen until like a few years ago. That's like,
well, exactly.
Yeah, like it does.
Think about it this way,
like how far
behind animated film has always had the impression that it's a less serious form, or that it's a novelty, or, much like the Ninja Turtles, a cartoon. And what a lot of people don't seem to remember is that Disney's Beauty and the Beast, there was no Best Animated Film category, so it was nominated for Best Feature Film. And then the next year, Best Animated Film was its own category.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, I think that's an interesting comparison of like, yeah, video games were kind of in that weird sort of like animated films where like the people that were into them obviously understood like there's a lot of like merit to this.
And the cool part about being ahead of the curve is like, well, you can also look at animated films from the 1970s, or like what Ralph Bakshi is doing, and just because there wasn't a category for best animated feature doesn't mean that there weren't people still striving to do the kind of work that could theoretically win that award had it been offered, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I guess they were thought of as weirdos the same way the people saying video games are art were thought of as weirdos by at least the mainstream media in like the 90s and 2000s. And now it's like, well, of course, like people are weird for not believing that now.
Yeah, and I mean, tying it all nice in a full circular bow, two circles on both sides of the bow. I think I break that up. All that to say, though, is a lot of people think that four gentlemen wearing large trench coats and hats are weirdos. But The life you save may be your own, and the stranger you're kind to in a public place may very well be not just a Ninja Turtle, but a hero turtle.
That's true.
The choice is up to you. Kindness is always a choice, but it's an easy one with a world of difference that it unlocks, much like Fredo's Twitter account is currently unlocked. So remind the good people where they can find you, and floor is yours. You got anything to plug, anyone to shout out, any beefs you want to settle?
No beefs. I'm, very famously nice. But you can find me at Utwitily. That's Utwitily. Utwit, I love you. Always appreciate folks joining the Friends of Fredo. Happy to have been here. I don't really have anything to plug. I'll say check out Arlen's show, The Hell Zone. I've been on there times, and it's a blast of kind of reviewing a particular genre of movie that I think of as Hell Zone-y movies, of a sort of a lower budget apocalyptic kind of sci-fi action vibe movie.
He calls his viewers mutants, and it's absolutely fitting.
Yes, freaks, mutants, yes.
He very much has, I honestly think it's that kind of, same Ninja Turtles vibe. It's the best parts of cartoonishness.
Now I gotta ask him about doing a Hellzone episode. I wonder if he would consider the Ninja Turtles movie to be like a Hellzone-y movie. I feel like it's kind of an edge case in the Hellzone, so I'm curious what his take on it is.
Well,
we did do Double Dragon, which is a very Hellzone.
You should definitely ask him about that. Also, pass along a message from his old pal Mayor. He should rename his show Arlen Down the House.
All right, I will let him know. But that's it for me. So Mayor, thanks for having me on. It's a blast as usual. Folks, check out Ninja Turtles. Check out the new show, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I couldn't gush about it enough. And Cowabunga Collection and Fredo on Twitter.
Yeah, it's anyone you pick. In many ways, Fredo is the fifth Ninja Turtle.
No, that's Venus de Milo.
Okay, in many ways, Fredo is the sixth Ninja Turtle.
Yeah, there's probably a sixth Ninja Turtle, but yeah, Venus de Milo from the terrible live action show in the mid '90s.
Wait, I do not remember this. I have a night of heavy Googling ahead of
all right, we're gonna not to go on too much of an aside, but yeah, we didn't talk about it, but they used I guess some of the suits they had from the movies.
Oh, we got this suit. It's just sitting there.
And I think they used the suit because they had different suits for the action sequences and for the more cinematic sequences. So they had the action sequence suits that were a lot more beat up and stuff, but they used and they looked bad. They looked bad up close because they were more flexible or whatever. That's what they used for this show. So in stills and stuff,
the butterface of VFX.
Yeah, it looks really. A lot of people have probably seen that meme picture of the Donatello actor screaming, and you could see his mouth and nose inside the mouth of the.
I have not, but I am definitely looking up pictures of Donatello's big wide mouth for various reasons.
So don't watch that show. Watch other Ninja Turtle stuff.
You are an absolute treat of a man, a cup of stout on a cold winter's night. Yeah. Do you want to send our guests home happy with a wisdom, a slogan, or a beloved regionalism?
Yes. As you listen to whatever night you're listening, whatever day or night you're listening to this episode, the soup of the day that day will be turtle soup. Thank you so much, everyone.
The song goes out to a girl in full-size knee pads. Ready? I met a girl, her name was Molly. Took me to the skate park, taught me how to ollie. Scale this nose, bone, beginner's luck. Sick 900 like Tony Hawk. Bam Margera, Ryan Dunn. Skater girls are very fun. Punk rock skate queen, be with me. Punk rock skate queen, I love thee. Spend all day on half a pipe. We fell in love that very night. Ain't no syrup